Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whatever time it is, wherever you're tuning in. Hope you're having a good week so far and welcome back. Today I wanted to talk about something that I've seen on social media a lot recently, and I've also had a couple of questions about, and it's kind of an icky term if I'm honest, but I'm definitely seeing it more, and it's around being skinny fat or looking skinny fat. When we think about what skinny fat actually means, generally speaking, you are not overweight, or not overweight by BMI standards anyway. So you're not at risk of obesity, you are probably a relatively small human, but you don't look or feel particularly lean or strong or athletic, right? You might feel a little bit softer, a little more squishy than maybe you ideally want to. You might struggle to build muscle. You might be quite familiar with dieting, but every time you diet, you just look a little bit smaller, but you don't actually see any change to your shape. Skinny fat is definitely not a scientific term, but it does describe a real situation that a lot of people face. And at its core, it's really a body composition issue. You have relatively low muscle mass and high levels of body fat for someone of your size. And that combination is what creates that kind of softer look. It's definitely not just fat on its own. And I think that's where most people struggle, because they think, I'm relatively slim, I'm in say a size 10 pair of jeans, but I just don't love this feeling around my midsection, etc. They think I need to lose some body fat. And it's not that they don't need to lose some body fat. Maybe that will improve overall health markers by dropping body fat percentage. But again, as I kind of mentioned, you often just look a little bit smaller, and that softness isn't really solved. That muscle to fat ratio hasn't measurably improved as much as it could have done, because we've only focused on that fat loss piece. There might be slightly less of you, but your body composition hasn't really changed that dramatically. I want to cover off how you end up at that position, feeling kind of skinny fat, and obviously how we can fix it. When it comes to the main reasons behind how we end up here, the first is chronic dieting. And what I mean by chronic dieting is that you've attempted to diet and maybe successfully dieted multiple times over multiple years a lot of the time. And what this can look like is dieting to lose body fat, but also losing muscle along the way because we're not resistance training and we're not prioritizing protein. And then over time, that weight gradually comes back up to where you were before. But again, if we're not resistance training, we're not prioritizing protein through this period of weight regain, what is the composition of that weight we are regaining? It is body fat. When we go through multiple cycles of this, losing muscle, gaining fat, losing muscle, gaining fat, we actually end up metabolically worse off, and we can end up with this kind of softer physique. The second is a shit ton of cardio and an aversion to resistance training. Look, cardio is great. We absolutely should be doing cardio. Fantastic for your health, for your cardiovascular fitness, and actually can be helpful if prescribed correctly with fat loss. But what it isn't very good at is muscle preservation or muscle building. Maybe you run regularly, a couple of times a week, every week without fail, and you feel great for it. You get all of the amazing benefits, physical and mental, from cardio, from that scheduled exercise, but it's not necessarily working in your favor when it comes to increasing levels of muscle mass and keeping body fat relatively low. It's just not the best tool for that specific job. You might also be someone who goes to a lot of fitness classes, right? And maybe sometimes they use weights. And you might be thinking, oh, well, I do that. I resistance train because I go to body pump 2-3 times a week, and I'm literally lifting weights within that class. Now, I'm not saying that that's nothing, it's something, but the intention and the stimulus from a fitness class compared to, say, structured resistance training, they just aren't the same. They're not comparable. So when there's no real stimulus to build said muscle, again, you can see how we may end up in this more skinny fat camp. And another reason is that oftentimes people have just never really set themselves up for a period of time where you are prioritizing muscle maintenance or muscle growth through their nutrition. So this might look like a distinct lack of protein, a distinct lack of fiber, and a lot of the carbs coming from kind of more refined sugars and ultra processed foods. Now, it's not that those types of foods directly lead to more fat gain. They don't. Only a sustained calorie surplus can do that. But you're also going to have a really hard time building muscle or maintaining muscle if protein is at 40 grams a day and we barely look in the direction of fruits or vegetables. Now we come on to the good stuff, how we fix it. Now, this isn't always something that people love to hear, honestly. I think, again, when we think about fat loss or dieting, it is quite instant gratification. You can see progress week to week. It feels really reassuring. Like you get that feedback on a regular basis that things are changing. With this exact body composition scenario, where really the problem is that we have not enough muscle, it's a muscle problem overall, rather than I just need to lose a bit of weight problem. Because again, you've probably tried that and didn't really get you to where you wanted to be. In this scenario, if I'm completely honest, the best thing you can do is to stop chasing fat loss temporarily. Not forever, but for a period of time. I get it, it's uncomfortable because you might feel like you're in a position where you don't want to gain any more fat. But if you keep trying to diet from this position, you are going to stay pretty stuck. And I'm also not saying that you need to see fat gain or weight increase. You don't need to be going straight into a surplus here. Most people fuck that up, if I'm completely honest. Either way overshooting it or just treating it like a complete free-for-all. I personally have seen amazing results from many, many women who have just committed to maintenance, finding where their maintenance range is, prioritizing protein, prioritizing fiber, getting their meal structures in a good place, fueling their training properly, and really focusing on food quality. I would honestly recommend doing that for a minimum of 3 months, but honestly, the longer the better. I actually find that maintenance approach is often the best way, so this doesn't feel too overwhelming. I'm not saying go into a bulk tomorrow, eat more calories than you need, because you might at least initially end up worse off. The next thing you have to do, and I really mean have to do, is train properly. Train, not exercise. Both are good, but both are different. Coming back to my point earlier, you might already go to fitness classes where there's a bit of resistance. That's cardio with resistance. It's not the same as structured and progressive strength training. And when I say structured, I mean covering all of the major muscle groups, particularly the ones that you're wanting to see development in, right? I mean committing to the same movements across an extended period of time, week in, week out. Not just changing your mind on what you fancy doing one week to the next when you get bored. Most people would do really well on somewhere between 3 and 5 sessions a week. There needs to be enough volume. You should probably think about the way that you're structuring your training split. You also need to be allowing for recovery. This is a much bigger topic, and I actually have a previous video on this, which I'll link in the comments. The most important thing to consider when you're thinking about training is your intensity. Your body will not change. It will not grow new tissue unless it has a reason to. You should be seeing that things are improving over time. You can do an extra rep, you can do an extra kilo, you can do it with better form, you can slow it down and have more control over that movement. But the point is you want to be logging it, tracking it, seeing that progression over time. That is your best driver of whether muscle growth is actually happening or not. And the last thing is the worst one in a way, because it really is that you just need to give it time. It is not as quick as fat loss. Fact. Commit to eating at maintenance with all of the right nutritional structures that I've mentioned for 3 to 6 months. Pair that with training consistently and hard. Those two things together will give you more lean mass. Lean mass, not fat mass. Once you have 3, 6 months, 12 months, however long you want to commit to it under your belt, you should be able to feel that your body literally is different. You should feel that there are muscles under your skin. You should feel that you have more of that kind of tautness and tightness that you're looking for. And at that point, if you still think there's a bit of body fat here that I could do with losing, you are in a much better position to pull that lever on fat loss, lose that layer of body fat in order to reveal what you have been building. But without that muscle bit, it's a never-ending cycle. If I was to summarize this really simply, skinny fat is usually a result of you spending too much time thinking about how to stay small without enough time being focused on how you can build the lean mass you're wanting to see. In order to change that, we literally must build a body that looks different when fat is lost. I hope that helps. As always, questions in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe, and I'll see you this time next week. Love you. Bye.